Welcome to Seller's Journey, the podcast where we speak to great sales reps and leaders and share their real stories from start to sales success.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joseph Fung, and today we're speaking with Nick Maldonado. Nick is a sales manager at Communication Zone, a Telus dealer of business and corporate solutions. Nick, thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Joseph.
I'm really excited about this conversation today because not only has a trusted kind of friend and partner introduced us, but I didn't get to share this before, but I also spent some time overseas teaching English. And so I feel like there's a bit of affinity to your story. So I'm really eager to hear more.
Awesome. Whereabouts were you?
I was in China, definitely not the same part of the world as you, but that time overseas was definitely insightful for me. So I'm looking forward to hearing how it impacted your journey as well.
Very life-changing, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned how you're working at a dealer, Communication Zone. Maybe you can help our audience a little bit with kind of your elevator pitch. What makes you and your firm different than other dealers or other service providers?
Sure. So as I'd say, in general, Communication Zone's been around for about 20 years. And for us, we're focused on providing the best corporate and business solutions, and that's both in terms of wireless, voice over IP, collaboration tools, and fleet solutions. But what makes us unique and different is we've really perfected a personal touch, and we have account managers that are experts in the products and what they do, and really making sure that what we provide to the customer is something we can support through and through, both during the sale and afterwards for the lifetime of the customer.
I love how that role of the sales group is so critical to the offering. So I love that perspective. So thinking a little bit about your journey and your story, maybe you can start off a little bit. Where'd you go to school? Where'd you grow up?
So I actually grew up in downtown Toronto, and I say the real downtown. It was Sherbourne and the Esplanade, so right around the St. Lawrence Market. And I started going to an alternative school, really called Downtown Alternative School, and the focus there was more on peacemaking and conflict resolution, which sounds kind of hokey when you say it out loud, but from an early age, it meant that when we had any sorts of conflicts, the usual playground scuffles and things you get between kids, we were actually trained to have the kids ourselves have the two people in the conflict, and then we'd all sit in a diamond pattern or a square, and you'd have two other kids that acted as the mediators. And looking back now, I realize how important that was because it kind of set the stage for open communication and active listening right from elementary school. So
I love that focus on the active listening and communications. That's such a great foundation for a fantastic sales career.
Oh, yeah. I mean, growing up, having to deal with all kinds of other conflicts, like, family and other friends. When I left that school in grade 6, it's just something that I feel helped me to be a more effective communicator in all aspects of my life. So, I mean, fast forward to high school, and I went to Rockaway Mennonite Collegiate in Kitchener. So again, another school with, I'd say, more of a pacifist focus, or really focused on faith and in general on living a good kind of life. Me personally, I'm not religious, but I'd say I'm spiritual. So that whole part of the education just gave me, first of all, a higher academic standard, but also reinforced everything else I'd learned up to that point about proper communication and just being a good person.
And then continuing into university, you spent a bit of time overseas as part of your university career, right?
Yes. Yeah, so I actually ended up, at the behest of a friend who encouraged me. So I have an older sister that ended up studying abroad as well. She lived with some family in Ecuador, spent a year working in Guatemala, and she was encouraging me to do it. But another friend explained to me how important she thought her study abroad journey was, and I was lucky enough to be able to work with the Spanish department at the University of Waterloo to get me into the University of Alicante in Spain.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was a really awesome term for me. Good 4 months abroad.
So you went to school. You've spoken a lot about how profound and how impactful it was. As you wrapped up at school, what was your first role? What was your first kind of working experience? Was it a sales role?
It wasn't. So when I came back from Spain, I had done co-op jobs at the University of
Hmm.
Waterloo, and during that time, I was a TA for a computer science course. It's a CS 100 for any Waterloo alumnus out there. So it was just an introduction to computing, to a whole bunch of apps, the Microsoft Office suite, and programming. So
Hmm.
I aced the course, and then I saw a co-op job opportunity popping up to teach it. And so I'd say that kind of took all the other lessons I learned and helped me focus on being an effective communicator, being able to be patient and really teach in the right way for different styles of learning. But
Right.
when I finished university, or I'd say when I came back from Spain, I had no more co-op terms left. And so the gravy train was kind of running out at that point. So I ended up getting a job at Value Village. And I was a recycler in the back. So I was the one wearing the green vest that accepts donations, drives the forklift. It was really a physical job. I got to banter a lot with the people in the back. And to a point, I would be
Hmm.
pricing out the furniture and some of the bigger donations that came in. So sometimes there were customers that would come in and try and negotiate a price, and the manager was pretty strict, right? It's whatever I price it at is what we should be selling it for. So that was sort of a basic negotiation, I'd say. And before that, I'd even done Spring Masters locally, which is sort of a door-to-door lawn care company, and that was probably my first real foray into sales, and it was tough because not everybody wants to pay somebody to aerate their lawn or do their driveway, things like that.
So in all this, you've got a great opportunity to spend time interacting with a huge variety of people. I think that does a great job of building a foundation for empathy. But one of the things that jumped out as we got to hear your story and the introduction that I had to you is that you also spent some time at Maxwell's Music House. Can you share a little bit about what that was like?
Oh man, that was a great time. So, first of all, I'd say I've been in a couple of bands over the years, one with two very good friends, and another one as well where there were four of us, and another buddy that joined the fold. And so, Maxwell's Music House was kind of the first venue in the Waterloo region, owned by Paul Maxwell, of course, a local guy and a Laurier grad. And he was really warm and welcoming to all local musicians. So there were a lot of gigs that we played there. We got a chance to rent out the space occasionally on weekends to rehearse. And Paul was just awesome. Like there's nobody better that would allow people that are interested in music or just creative expression to kind of explore. And I briefly did do some bartending there. It was more, 3 or 4 months or so just before he decided to move locations to where Dooley's used to be and where he is now, which is huge. So, I mean, aside from just enjoying the musical part of it myself as a musician, gigging and meeting lots of other people in the music community, I got to spend some time behind the bar, which was, an exercise in sales in and of itself. It was very fast paced. I got to talk with different people. Some people really like to talk and have a lot to say, and other people, they just want to drink and don't want to banter. So I definitely got to interact with all different kinds.
Nice. So here's the big question. These are all fantastic opportunities and really rich experiences. Your first real sales role, though, I think, was at a Telus kind of retail location. Can you share about how that came to be and how you got into that role?
Yeah, so it actually came about because I was at the Value Village, and I wasn't exactly. I'd say I knew that I could be doing better for myself. I was just doing the recycler position. It was great because it kept me in shape, but I realized that I've got a university degree, I've got a double major, I've got something on the wall with a gold seal that tells me I've achieved a certain standard for myself. And
Hmm.
there were quite a few times where people would come in to donate things and we'd talk. And on more than one occasion, somebody would tell me, "You seem to speak very properly. You have a very good way with words and you seem to know what you're talking about and you seem smart. What are you doing here?" And eventually, I thought to myself, like, maybe there's a point here. I should probably start
Hmm.
looking at some options now that I've got a degree. I'm obviously qualified for something different. So I spent a few months kind of thinking about what I wanted to do. I did apply for some jobs that I didn't make the cut for. So I did a few interviews here and there. And I ended up dropping a whole bunch of resumes around the KW area. The last place that I dropped a resume at was a Telus store. And it's funny because I was walking by with a friend and I just made a joke about how, oh, Telus, whatever, sure, I'll apply here. I like cell phones. I'd spent a lot of time in university actually rooting and installing custom software and charging people for it. So I obviously
Mm.
knew the tech. Why not just apply just for the fun of it? And they were the first ones to call me back. So I ended up taking the interview. I liked the manager that interviewed me, and I worked there for about a year and a half. So I got to apply a lot of the other conversational skills that I learned and my tech knowledge too.
Now, the kind of big shift though is now getting onto the more just the business side of things, and your move over to your current role at Communication Zone. How did that opportunity come up, and what was that transition like?
I'd say that it was another result of some chance encounters and some feedback from people in the store. So I was consistently a high performer from a numbers perspective and really in terms of customer satisfaction. Telus is really big on that. And one of the metrics that they judge all people in the stores by is customer experience. So I consistently exceeded 130% of my goal in surveys and everything else. And my sales numbers were good on the retail floor. There were some folks that would come into the store just to buy a phone for their kids or for themselves that were actually ex-Telus employees on the business side. There were a couple of gentlemen that had come in and said the same thing that a few people at Value Village had told me was, you seem to know what you're talking about and you seem to be a smart guy. Have you considered moving up to business sales? And at the time, I was, well, how old was I? I guess it was about 24, 25. I was in three bands, three gigging active bands at the time. I was enjoying life, and the job that I had was good. It was fun. It paid the bills, and it got helped me exercise my nerd muscles a little bit. But there was one day that a gentleman came in, and he needed something really simple. It was just a SIM card swap, and normally we'd be able to do that ourselves. But when I
Mhm.
tried to get into the account, it said it was a corporate account, and I didn't have access. So I had to call in, and there was about 10 minutes of hold time, and he and I were talking. It turns out that he was an area sales manager for Telus Business Solutions, and he just left the company. And he said to me the same thing as the others had said. It said, how would you feel about maybe considering business side of things? Because you seem to know the Telus products really well. And I kind of laughed and I said, well, you're not the first person to say that, but what do you mean? That's when he told me who he was. And he suggested that, if you want, I actually know the guy that's replacing me in my sales manager role. So why don't we fire
Wow.
off and email him to him right now and see if we can score you an interview? My heart kind of skipped a beat and I realized that this is actually a guy that would have some influence. So I took him up on that.
I love how you seized that opportunity. That is such a wicked, wicked chance. Now, thinking a little bit about that role, your new role, I do have one area I'd love to dig into because when Heather introduced us, she also mentioned a really interesting story about
Uh
risk and
oh.
drama. So, if you're comfortable with it, one of the things that always strikes me is we speak to sales professionals, and in many ways, the biggest and scariest things we need to deal with is our Zoom call dropping in the middle of a conversation. Uh, but she's told me that your store, your office was robbed. Can you share a bit about that?
Oh man. So I guess there's two different occasions where the store that I work in has been robbed. One of them was on a weekend, nobody was there. So no problems, I guess, other than the inventory and the cost, but nobody was hurt. But actually,
Thank
this
goodness.
was this was earlier this year. I want to say February, but I might have blocked it from my mind a little bit. Normally, by that time of day, because it was just before 5 o'clock, there would only be one person in the store. But that particular day, there were four employees there, including myself. And so we were all, three of us anyway, were getting ready to pack up. And I remember being on the phone with a colleague. He was in our Etobicoke office, and we were just chatting at the end of the day, kind of debrief and talk about some opportunities and pricing and whatnot. And it didn't really register to me what was happening at first because I heard someone come in, I heard some yelling, and I thought to myself, well, this is Brantford. I mean, we get people yell all the time in the store, so nothing unusual. But what kind of set it off was one of my other colleagues was in the back. She turned and was walking towards the security cameras because she also heard the yelling. And I was on the phone, I was focused on something else. She dropped her drink and just bolted out the back of the store without saying a word. And as soon as she did that, I'm like, oh, that's weird. And that's when I realized what was happening. And I just kind of told my colleague very quietly, because I had my headset on, I just told him, we're being robbed. Call the police. I gotta
Wow.
go. I gotta hang up the phone right now in case they see. So yeah, they were in and out in 3 minutes. Uh, they actually didn't see me at first because I was behind a partition at my desk, but they did kind of rough up the other two employees that were at the front, and it's a robbery. They had weapons. They were really aggressive, and at some point, I wasn't sure what to do because they didn't know I was there, and I couldn't exactly make a phone call because that would make noise and raise an alarm for them.
Mhm.
Eventually, I kind of stood up after a couple minutes and just put my hands up and said, guys, is there anything I can do to get you out of the store? Can I help you in any way? They didn't like that, but nothing happened. They
Oh
just,
man.
they told me to stand back. I did. I just kind of had to watch as they finished packing up the massive shipment that we received that day, and they left. So
Was everybody
quite an
okay at the
experience.
end?
Yeah, I think the other two were definitely very shaken up because all three of us had a gun to our face, but the two of them in particular got shoved and got hit with the gun, and so we were all okay. Like, we didn't really want to revisit it after that. We just decided, all right, let's take a couple days off. Our bosses or dealer principals were really good about obviously giving us a chance just to process what happened. And the next week we were back to work, and we just try to keep the routine, keep business as usual.
That's a quite the story, and definitely something I think most of our interviewees and many of our audience don't have to deal with. Thank goodness. I'm sorry that you had to deal with that. That must have been extremely stressful.
Thank you. It was kind of weird. It's one of those things that when it's happening, it's very surreal, and you almost don't believe that it's happening. But then after the fact, I think it was, I came home. I had to go to the police station. I ate a sub. I told my roommate what happened. And then I even went to karaoke that night at the museum downtown. I mean, I sang a song. I had a drink. I was just kind of keeping to myself, and I guess putting off processing what happened. And then when I got
Wow.
home and I got into bed, that's when it hit me. And I was like, oh my God. So
What an
fortunately,
experience.
yeah, but I mean, fortunately, I took the next day off and just kind of kept to myself, played the guitar. I called my boss and just talked to her about it. But it was all good after a couple of days. It's just, again, one of those things that when it happens, you don't really realize the full gravity of something like that until afterwards. But fortunately, we're all rational adults, and we can process it over time and just get back to normal.
So I bet all of this context makes it a lot easier to handle situations that would normally stress out a sales rep, like objections or cranky customers. I imagine that puts things in perspective.
Well, the good news is normally if we come up against objections, people aren't threatening us. But
Hmm.
salespeople on the phone or even going door to door always have to face maybe folks that aren't so willing to see things from your side or don't even want to entertain a conversation. And people can be pretty rude when that happens, but you just have to roll with the punches. It's the best thing you can do.
Nick, I have to say I'm so impressed with how kind of grounded you are and how calm you are speaking about a situation that would have scared the living crap out of me. So, yeah, hats off to you. I'm really impressed.
Thank you.
I know I promised that I wouldn't keep you too long, and I really truly appreciate you opening up and sharing some of the details of your journey. Before I let you go, do you mind if we ask a couple of rapid fire questions?
Go for it.
Awesome. You've had a great variety of experiences, but specifically thinking about selling, what's your favorite sales tool?
I'd have to say it's my smartphone. because it's something I can demonstrate features on. I can use it for video calls. It's pretty much a full-on communications hub and sales tool in and of itself.
Nice. And what about your favorite movie?
Probably Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Good choice. I like that. Nice. And when you were a kid, what did you want to grow up to be?
Fireman. Definitely a fireman.
Nice. Nick, this has been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate you having me on, and thanks to you as well.
I'm looking forward to our next conversation, and I hope you stay safe and stay sane, and we'll chat again soon.
Likewise. Have a good afternoon.
Ciao.